This is a project at least 5 or 6 years in the making. My goal when I originally started this channel was to go from sheep to sweater. Now we're not going fully to sweater, so this is kind of a local intermediate stop along the way. So we're gonna go from sheep to hat. Since this project has been on my mind for years, it has given me the time to collect some fleeces. I have at least 4 different fleeces to choose from. So the first thing is looking at all of them and seeing which one might be the best one for me to choose. I am finally going to be diving into some of my raw fleeces that I've acquired over the last 3 years. These fleeces are very fresh from the barn, let's say, and they smell like it. So I am going to be opening them and looking at them today outside. While I'm not going to be processing all 3 of these fleeces, I did want to talk about all the ones that I have, and I'm going to pick what I hope is going to be the best introductory fleece to work on to see if I can turn it from fleece to yarn? Am I aiming a little high? Maybe. The first fleece I want to talk about is a Gotland fleece. It's from a 6-month-old Gotland sheep, and I got this a few years ago at Ryland. The scorecard is absolutely impeccable on this fleece, and when I bought it, I had no idea what I was looking for, and I can't really say that I really know now either. I'm still very new to this. I love learning a little bit more about different sheep breeds, so I thought that I would give you a little bit of an introduction to each of the different kind of sheep fleeces that I have here. So the Gotland sheep is believed to be descendants of the flocks first established on the Swedish island of Gotland during the Viking era. On the northernmost tip of Gotland, the Faroe Island is home to the native breed of Gutefår, and I'm so sorry about the pronunciations. I'm trying my best, but I also speak German, so that might be getting into it a little bit. I'm trying really hard. Many of the modern European short-tailed breeds of sheep are descended from the Gutefår sheep, and the modern-day Gotland is one of them. Sweden, of course, has the largest populations of Gotland sheep flocks. I think that their temperament is wonderful. I've been lucky enough to see them in multiple sheep shows, and they have just the sweetest temperament. I love snuggling with them. They do not have horns, and they have these curly fleeces, and they don't have hair on their faces or their legs. Compared to other sheep breeds, the Gotland sheep are relatively new in the United States. The first was brought over in 2003, and the Gotland Upbreeding Project began, and it wasn't until 2015 that 97.5% Gotland lambs are born in North America, as well as a small number of 100% Gotlands, and they're really trying to maintain genetic diversity. So what's really wonderful about the Gotland fleeces is that they are more curls in their locks. They don't really have any crimp at all. They are silky and lustrous, and they really have this beautiful, almost gray silver coloring because of their luster. Even though the color of the wool is silver and shines really silver in the sunlight. This is quite an old fleece, so it needs quite a bit of cleaning before you see that luster, but you can even see it on the sheep as you are observing them run around in the fields. They really look like they're shining silver. Gotland sheep fleeces are very fine, so their micron count is quite small, and because this is a 6-month-old fleece, or the fleece from a 6-month-old sheep, it's even finer, which is why, as you probably saw on the price tag, it is not an inexpensive fleece to buy. I debated for a long time whether or not to get this fleece, and I'm so glad that I bought it when I did. But I'm definitely going to wait a little bit until I touch this one. Gotland fleeces are absolutely incredible, and I cannot wait to work with it, but I think this might be my most precious fleece that I have, so I'm going to wait until I have a little bit more experience before I start tackling this one. The next fleece I want to talk about is this Romney wool, and while Romneys do come in light colors, most of the ones that I've seen at Rhinebeck have been that beautiful teddy bear brown, and they look like teddy bears, although they have been quite some feisty sheep when I saw them at the sheep shows. The Gotlands are so even-tempered, and the Gotlands and the Romneys show at the same time at Rhinebeck, and oh, the Romneys are fighting their handlers the whole time while the Gotlands are just relaxing. But this is another fleece where I feel like I again, have no idea what I'm looking for, but the scorecard was quite good. The sheep is 1 year and 10 months old when it was shorn, and it was 10 months worth of growth. So why don't we look a little bit closer at this fleece and about Romneys in general, especially Romneys in North America. The American Romney traces its beginnings back to the marshy area of Kent in England. Its origin lies with the old and established dual-purpose Romney Marsh breed, which is over 250 years old. It's a dual-purpose breed, which means that it is bred and can be used for both meat and wool, but I'm personally interested more in the wool. As you can see, the fiber is super fluffy. It has so much crimp to it. It is wild, although it does form separate locks. It is considered a long wool, just like the Gotland sheep is. So in comparison to Gotland wool in adults has a micron count of 35 to 45. Lambs can be as low as 20 microns, which is why my lamb fleece is so precious. The Romney fleeces are even smaller, so even finer, with a micron count of about 29 to 36 microns. Like I said, they come in many different colors. It is the most popular sheep breed in New Zealand, and I think a lot of those sheep, at least the ones in my mind, are very natural, like cottony white. But the ones that I always spot at Rhinebeck are this beautiful teddy bear brown. And I cannot tell you how fluffy and soft this fleece is. I wish I could hand this to you through the screen so you can feel it. It definitely has a lot of the lanolin still in it. So it's still pretty greasy and it's been compressed for a while. So it needs careful handling and a good wash before I can use it, but this I don't think is also going to be a very good candidate for my first fleece to process. Like I said before, it's just a little too precious and I want a little bit more experience before I touch this one and I try my hand at it. So I have saved the one that I think I'm going to work on for last. Now I actually have it in two sections in here, and this is an alpaca fleece. It might be two alpaca fleeces. I don't remember 100%, I have to be honest. Editing me jumping in here really quickly to say that I'm going to improperly refer to one of these fleeces, unfortunately, and it's going to be the one that I'm going to process. And it is two separate fleeces in this bin. It is a sheep fleece from a Ryland sheep, just so you know. It's two fleeces, one alpaca, one Ryland. Let's talk about the alpaca. These fleeces actually came from Scotland. When I went to Scotland with my mom on like a fleece and yarn and history journey of weaving and knitting and all of that, we went to a sheep and alpaca farm called Elkies, and I got to meet the alpaca that the fleece came from, and I bought it. Before I start working on any of it, why don't I give you a little bit more information about alpaca wool, alpaca fleeces, a little bit of history on the alpacas. They are the result of nearly 6,000 years of animal husbandry in South America, and Andeans have worn garments finished from lovely alpaca fleeces. They're part of the camelid family, so think camels as well as vicuña and the llama and of course the alpaca. They were first imported into North America in the early 1980s, and they are quite sweet, easily managed, and hardy creatures. Again, another one where I wish I could hand it to you just through the screen. It is so incredibly soft. It also helps that alpacas don't have lanolin like wool does. So if you have a sensitivity to wool, either because it's maybe a bit scratchy or because of the lanolin, then alpaca is something that you can try because alpacas do not have lanolin. The fiber that they produce is very, very fine. The one that I have is called a huacaya, which is mostly hollow fiber. So alpaca is also much warmer than wool because the fibers are hollow. So that is very much more insulating. So anytime you make anything with alpaca, just remember it is going to be very, very warm. And there's also the Surrey alpacas, which is a very silky type of fiber. Talking about micron count, their micron count is between 22 and 27, so very, very fine. It is also, I feel like, really, really precious because alpacas are only sheared once every year to 2 years, whereas sheep are shorn up to 2 times a year. So this is quite a lot of growth for me to have of this very lovely alpaca. And also probably another reason why I will not be processing it this time. And instead, let's talk about the fleece that I will be processing, which is from a Ryland sheep. The Ryland is one of the oldest English sheep breeds going back 7 centuries, and they were bred and grazed on rye pastures, of course, giving them their name. They are quite docile, and I got to visit the farm Elkies in Aberlour, and I had such a great time. I was lucky enough to be there during lambing and kidding season. It was just so wonderful to see the animals in their element, and I was lucky enough to see both the fleeces that they had for sale, of which, of course, I chose one sheep and one alpaca, as well as the finished wool and then wool blankets that they make from their fleeces. So I got to see what it looks like coming from a mill before I'm going to try to do this myself with this particular fleece. Now, why did I choose this fleece as the one to do? So for me personally, this was my least precious fleece in terms of cost. The second is that it is quite a dirty fleece, so I felt like I could see a lot of change in it if I washed it. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. These sheep just live on the pasture and they are having a great time, so I'm happy for the sheep. It just does have a lot of things that I need to skirt off of it. It has a lot of lanolin that has to be boiled off of it. But the other side of this fleece and what makes it so nice is that it is actually very resistant to felting. One of the biggest issues as a first-time processor of fleece, the first step in this is cleaning the fleece. And if you agitate it too much, or if you change the temperature too much, or if you add, I don't know, too much soap, there's just a lot of ways that you can accidentally ruin a fleece by felting it. And it's really nice that the Ryland fleece resists felting because of the structure of the individual fibers. So that's why this is the perfect choice for me, I think, to do as my first processing attempt of going from raw fleece to hopefully maybe yarn. So the next steps, I guess, are I'm going to have to look up if I have to skirt this one. There's definitely a lot of VM in here, like vegetable matter and some droppings and things. Definitely going to have to scour this fleece, and we can start with this one. I am so excited. Relooking at all these fleeces just really reignites my excitement to work with them because they're all so beautiful and so soft and unique. Oh my gosh, the alpaca one, the one that I know is alpaca, is so soft. It's wild how soft it feels, and it's definitely a very different feeling because it doesn't have lanolin. So with a Ryland fleece chosen as the first one that I'm ever going to process from raw wool to knitting yarn, I think we have to go through a few of the steps that we have to do. So we have to wash the fleece, aka scour it, because it's full of basically the pasture that the sheep lived on, as well as lanolin, which is a really lovely moisturizing waxy substance that covers the wool, but it also makes it a little bit dirty. It can go rancid. You want to remove a good amount of that off of the fleece. You want to pick it, and that kind of involves, it's like this. You pick it because it looks like you're picking at it, removes a lot of the dirt from the fleece. After doing that, you want to card or comb it with this particular, I don't have combs, so I'm going to card it. And the step after that is to spin it. And then once you've spun it and plied it, you are ready with a yarn to make into whatever you want. And this time we're going to knit something. So step one, let's go scour some fleece. I don't really know what I'm doing, but we have to start somewhere. Today we are going to see if we can get this fleece a little bit more clean by washing and scouring it. I am definitely not going to be doing things correctly, so you're going to watch me take some steps that I now know maybe better about. However, this sheep had a lovely life in Scotland, and so it was out in the pasture, it was in the barn rolling around in hay, so we definitely have a lot of vegetable matter matted in the fur. It is very lanolin heavy, so it is quite greasy, and I do think that we've got some urine stains in the fleece as well. So this one needs some heavy cleaning. I decided to just kind of dive in at the deep end and clean this fleece, or at least try to. Before I even thought about dunking this fleece in water, I tried my hand at skirting it. I don't think that this fleece was skirted, so I'm taking away bits that seem really very felted, very matted together, or is full of poop basically, which might kind of wash out, but at least all the videos that I saw online recommended removing those bits and skirting it. Also, all the fleece that I'm skirting away is not going to waste. I'm just using it as mulch around some of the more cold sensitive plants, which maybe I should have done before it snowed and froze, but I don't know, maybe it'll help, and even if it doesn't help these plants, they could still be composted over time. After I did my best at skirting this fleece, again, I watched videos online of how to do this. I don't know that I did a very good job. I started with filling a tub. Also, great job filming here. You get a wonderful view of the back of my head. I filled a plastic bin in my bathtub with warm water, and I was told that if you go hotter over time, that's safer than if you go from hot to cold. You can really see where the water was really going and flowing into the fleece. It is that beautiful white, but oh my goodness, look at how brown that water is. And there's no soap in this particular bath. It's just pretty warm water, and of course you should never put that down your drains, because even though I didn't scour it, there's still a chance that there's lanolin here that could come off. I then did 3 soaks with soap, 2 with like a dish soap and 1 with a wool soap to try and get more of the dirt out. I kind of wanted to do another soak after the third one with more soap, but I was really worried that at this point that I'm just rubbing it too much and I keep on lifting it in and out and that it's just getting way too manhandled, and I was worried that I was getting close to felting this fleece. I don't know. You all let me know as you're watching this. Am I touching it too much? Because I feel like I might have, and I really should have used like mesh bags. This is all the stuff that I was able to pick out as I was putting the fleece in and out. And then after the 3 soap rinses or soap soaks, I did 2 or 3 rinses in fresh, clean water. With all of the handling of this fleece and picking up and putting it down, it ended up breaking into thirds. And this first third, I think, looks the best. It looks, I mean, there's still definitely chunks and bits and things in it, but it really looked quite nice and clean, at least in comparison to some of the other bits. Especially, I think my guess is that there's some bits of this that you can see that are urine stained. We were looking at I think the cut side, and now I'm turning it over to the other side, and I don't know. I think this might need another rinse. Please let me know what you think in the comments, because I don't know if I cleaned this enough. I have the urge to say that mistakes were made in my first attempt at washing or scouring a fleece, but I think the better way to look at it is that I learned some new things. I learned some lessons. I'm a bit of a perfectionist and I can get frozen in doing something, and it's one of the reasons that I bought fleeces 3 years ago and I never touched them, is because I was overwhelmed with the amount of information I'd have to learn in order to do something. It's why I enjoy taking classes. For example, weaving is very similar. It's a lot to learn, a lot of new terminology, and my weaving class was wonderful at teaching me the things that are relevant. But when I'm going at it by myself because I can't find a fleece processing class near me, I'm so afraid of messing up, my perfectionism really takes over, that I just never do anything. And so sometimes I find it better just to dive in, knowing that I'm going to mess up, letting the process guide what I need to learn next. So for instance, I definitely need some of those mesh laundry bags. I did watch tutorials beforehand. I watched a lot of videos on different people processing fleece, and a lot of them had the mesh laundry bags, but I was like, I'm just gonna try it. I saw some people didn't use them, but I think in the future for me, I definitely want the mesh laundry bags. I just laid mine out to dry in a hallway, which was fine-ish, but the air circulation would really help. So I need to have some sort of screened or mesh area in order for the fleeces to dry. Some sort of laundry drying rack I think would work really well. I am still a little bit uncertain what to do with the rest of my fleeces. So I think this 1/3 of it turned out really, really well, and I'm going to continue processing it. I don't want to ruin the rest of this fleece though, and I actually have a friend who lives kind of close who raises her own sheep and goats, and she has processed her own fleeces before, and I'm going to stop by her place with my 2/3 of the fleece that I don't know what to do with, or if it needs to be washed again, or what I should do best with it, and see what she recommends. So I'm going to leave that alone, and I'm just going to continue on this fleece processing journey with a 1/3 of it that I think is in good enough state to continue working on, where I'm not afraid that I'm messing anything up. It looks like Santa's beard. It's also so soft. One of the things that I read about the Ryland breed is that it was actually a competitor to merino wool, and I have to say, I can see why. It is very, very soft. I'm so pleased with it, but there are still bits of dirt and things left in this fleece. It didn't fully wash out all of the vegetable matter and all of the dust and dirt. So the next step that a lot of people do is called picking or flicking. And I did this little bit by hand, and you can see how much of I shouldn't really do it over the rest of the fleece, but because this is going to get some of the dirt out when I do that, and how beautiful, lofty, and cloudy it is. I'm so excited when I see this. It was quite a bit of work though to do this bit by hand. It also, I didn't keep them all kind of nicely aligned. So I think what I'm going to do to pick through the rest of this fleece is I'm going to take dog brush. And of course I have got lots of dog brushes, so I'm going to use one of those. And the purpose of this step, from what I can see online, is to open up and loosen up the fibers. Also wax out the dirt. That last remaining bit of dirt, every step is supposed to get out more and more of that dirt. I'm going to go ahead and grab my flicker brush. Look at this this little lock structure. I am, oh gosh, I can't, I can't even talk. I am so excited at how wonderful this looks. So I'm hoping that we can get some of the rest of this dirt out, and I'll create these little clouds, and that might be the last step for today's processing. So obviously my technique with this is not good because I hurt myself, which is kind of funny because all the tutorials I found about picking fleece with a flicker brush or using a dog brush instead of a flicker brush says that a dog brush is safer because it is not as sharp, and yet I still managed to draw blood. So I decided, well, rather than risking injuring myself more and accidentally dyeing my fleece the color of my own blood, which sounds kind of hardcore, but it's not really what I'm going for, I am instead going to pick the rest of this fleece by hand, which is also a really nice way to experience all of my fleece. And it was just a really lovely way to continue to spend an evening watching the sunset behind the mountains. I might have to put on sunglasses in the future because it is so sunny out here, but I just love sitting out in the winter sun. It is such a gentle, beautiful sunlight, so I hope it's not too distracting if I'm looking at you like this. But this is as far as I've gotten in picking through the 1/3 of the fleece that I think is clean enough to continue working on. It turns into such a beautiful, fluffy cloud. I am so excited to keep preparing this. I think next time I'm going to show picking through the rest of this and then preparing it to be spun, either carding it or combing it. I haven't fully decided yet. This fluff isn't fully clean, but I'm hoping that maybe through the carding process or combing process and the spinning that more of that will come out, or I'll have the time to pick it out. But I was incredibly surprised at how well picking takes out so much stuff. Like stuff that I couldn't even see was in the wool fell out and came out like sand and grit and straw and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really shocked at how well that worked, but the hand picking is definitely taking a little bit longer than maybe picking it with a tool. But it is also so beautifully tactile. I love getting my hand on all of this beautiful raw wool. Very excited. So I'm gonna do one more step before I go to spinning. And I was between combing and carding, but I've decided to card it. From the little bit of research that I've done, the Ryland you can either comb or card. And I already had a set of combs that I was going to try and see if I could use for this step of the process. These are some, I believe, antique wool carders. I got them when I was out antiquing and thrifting, and I thought that they still were in pretty good condition. I'm trying to show you here the kind of stamp on the back to see if any of you can identify them, but they are quite rusted and the leather is not looking like it's in its best shape. So I decided to do an overnight soak in some vinegar to see if I could get most of the rust removed from the tines of these carders, because I'd rather not have the rust being processed into my fleece accidentally. Also, one of you mentioned in my last video that one of the things you need to be make sure of is that you're up to date on your tetanus shots when you're processing fleeces, and I fully agree. I feel like I call a lot of the processing equipment, and I get antique ones, and I have some new to me processing equipment for flax, which you'll hopefully see very, very soon, that I like to call my tetanus testers. Basically, yeah, there's just a lot of rust involved in some of these old tools that are still in good enough condition, I think, to use, but maybe you should be careful when you're using them. I lifted the carders out after about an hour just to see how long it would take. It was kind of a balance and trade-off with getting the rust off versus maybe degrading the leather with soaking it in vinegar, and same with swelling the wood, but really very minimal rust had come off. So I waited overnight, and the next morning you can see the water is definitely a lot dirtier and the tines are nearly free of rust, which is kind of amazing. I was super happy with this. I did put some leather conditioner on this afterwards to help with the condition of the leather, I was hoping, but when I attempted to do a practice carding of some wool using these carders, what ended up happening is that the leather was just disintegrating and the tines were too bent out of shape, and so it was time for me to take a trip to my local yarn shop. My local yarn store had decorated for the holidays, and I thought it was such a good idea to make these paper chains out of the yarn bands of yarn. I mean, what a great idea. I'm saving that for next time. They had one set of hand carders in the fineness or TPI that I needed left, so of course I grabbed that before spending some time just looking at the rest of the exhibits that they have, which is like antique hand spinning equipment from around the world, which I thought was super cool, some weaving things. I mean, they have so much of everything in here. My local yarn shop is definitely my happy place, and I wish I could get some of this antique furniture that they have in there, which just looks so beautiful, doesn't it? Anyway, I love my yarn store, and I hope to be going to some knitting evenings here in the future. Anyway, back to processing this fleece. I thought it would be interesting to measure how much of this picked fleece I was going to try to card through to eventually spin. It's not easy. It has so much volume to it, so I measured it a few times. The first time was like a little under 100 grams, then it was 116 grams, and then it was, I think, something like 109 grams, as you'll see here in a second. So I think we can safely say that I had roughly about 100 grams of picked through fleece that I was going to attempt to card into rolags to get ready for spinning. Now again, this is a huge learning curve for me, so when I was doing the carding, I was following some techniques that I saw from videos that I watched. I was trying to learn from the instructions that came with my carders. Sorry, I'm trying to get Nutella's attention. I love watching her investigate things that are new to her. I hope that it builds her confidence and makes her feel a little bit more safe and secure around things that are new to her, and see that they aren't scary, because she is sometimes a little bit nervous. So it's really nice to introduce her to new things. And of course, she loves these fleeces. She likes anything that smells like a farm or sheep. So yeah, this is my attempt at learning how to card, but I don't know if it's exactly the right technique, but I definitely spent a long time for the rest of the evening working on carding through all 100 grams of this fleece and just loving at how light and fluffy the rolags turned out to be. It definitely wasn't a quick process, but now I have a bunch of light and fluffy rolags that I cannot wait to start spinning into yarn. I am also starting to try to think about what I might make from this yarn. I don't know how fine or thick I'm going to spin it, but I feel like 100 grams is a good amount of yarn usually, especially if you're around fingering weight. That's just my guess. So that's what I'm starting to look at, seeing what I could maybe knit up from this. I definitely know that at every step of this process, I have a lot to learn, but it's just been really fun diving in and doing my best and seeing what comes out of it, because you have to start somewhere in order to improve, right? So I just know that there's going to be bits that I get to improve, and I'm getting so much information from you all. I think that's the best part about all of this, is that even though I don't have a teacher that lives very close by, I have all of you with all the experience that can give me feedback on all the steps that I'm doing and ways that I can improve. And it's hard to say how much I appreciate that. So thank you so much, because I feel like when I take the time to tackle the other 2/3 of the rest of this fleece and then the other 3 fleeces that I have, I'll be so much better just because of everything that I've learned from you all. So thank you again. It's finally the day to use my spinning wheel, maybe you'll see in a second, to go from rolags into creating a yarn. This would be my first hand spun yarn that I am trying to turn into a knitting project. Last year for Craftmas, I did hand spin some linen and I turned that into like a tapestry, a wall hanging, which is really fun. But this time I'm going to try to create some yarn that is at least somewhat usable or consistent enough to be usable in a knitting project. Or maybe the inconsistencies are what part of the beauty of it, part of the beauty of hand spun. So we'll see. But I guess first things first, let's see if I even have the equipment to create yarn, aka if I have a spinning wheel that works. I got this amazing antique flax wheel from an antique fair about a year ago. It didn't have any like proof that it could spin. It didn't have a drive band. At the time, like a little over a year ago, I hadn't really spun yet, so I didn't 100% know what to look for in a spinning wheel. But I watched a lot of Evie's videos on Jilly and Eve, and I thought this had a pretty good chance of actually being able to work. I took it out last night because I also want to practice a little bit before I work on my very precious fleece. I want a little bit more practice on some wool. When I realized that my flyer assembly looks a little suspicious. This is a double drive band wheel, or a double drive wheel, I think. And when the whirl turns, the flyer's supposed to turn. So that was my first clue that something was wrong here. The second clue was that I couldn't find an orifice. And the orifice is what you need in order for your raw wool to go through to be spun and twisted into yarn. And that is usually a very suspicious missing part. If you don't have an orifice, that's usually a very big indicator that it wasn't actually a working spinning wheel. There are, however, maker's marks on this wheel that I can't see or anywhere or find anywhere, and it's not like there's a few that if you see them, you know that it's a fake and not a real spinning wheel. Now, we're a little short notice for me to get replacement parts for my spinning wheel. There are a lot of places online where I can actually get more antique bits for wheels that are about this size, but they would take about a month to get here, which is just a little bit too long for me to wait. So I was trying to see if I could find a local solution, but as luck would have it, you know what was listed just a week ago? She is kind of huge, so I kind of have to hold her up. She's much bigger. I think potentially antique wheel, where the flyer assembly is, this one I know is fully correct. First of all, it has some spun wool on it, which means that someone, hopefully, maybe, I mean, they could also be tricking me, but it looks very, very likely that this wool was actually spun on this. We have the appropriate orifice, and when I look at the orifice, there's actually markings on there from when people were spinning both an S and Z twist direction on this. I just love that. It's like the evidence of use, and quite intense use for it to carve into the wood here. The flyer moves with a whirl. The whirl is threaded and can be removed from the spindle. The bobbin is in great condition. Like, everything about this wheel is good. Now, I could do a lot of trial and error, which I'm not against, but I now have 2 wheels that are like maybe they could work, but I don't have enough knowledge personally to understand how to make it so that they can work. Maybe if I played with them for about a month, I could get there, but I am so very lucky that Evie from Jillian Eve has been gracious enough to hop on a call with me and help me troubleshoot my wheels. So, okay, I have 2 wheels behind me. The first one, I have managed to get one working, but maybe we can start with the one that I don't fully understand yet. So I got this at an antique fair. Whoops. Oh, I am very suspicious. There's no orifice here.
I'd have to take a closer look kind of at the rest of the body of the wheel to see. A lot of times it's one of those tricky things because when you're teaching people to spin, when people are very, very brand new and it's like what they've ever done before has just been, and I don't mean just, obviously it's amazing, but like going to a local yarn store, buying yarn and knitting off of patterns that they purchased, sometimes you don't want that person to get discouraged with spinning. So you're like, you should buy a new wheel and afford it, or a new used wheel, you know, and make sure everything's working and really smooth so they can focus on the spinning. Sometimes people have had experience with other types of textile tools, such as knitting machines, and you know that they have a mind to figure things out because sometimes textile tools are just fussy. So I feel like you're one of those who would be potentially up for a little bit more work into a wheel to make it happen. So I'll tell you what you could do to get that one working.
100%, and I love making things work.
I think you have a little bit of a Franken wheel. So this is what a flyer would look like on a similar wheel. It's definitely that there's an orifice here. Generally on wheels of that shape and sort of orientation with the wheel over here and the sort of the traditional like Saxony style wheel, you're gonna have a metal rod going through the center of the flyer, and then like you noticed on that one, the flyer is attached to that, and then you need to have a whorl and an independently spinning bobbin.
Would the best bet to see if I could get a working flyer assembly be like having someone make one for me, or like
There's someone in Nebraska who does they do restorations. They actually did this bobbin for me. When I got this wheel, the bobbin was cracked.
Okay.
And they're called spirit wood.
You've mentioned it before. Yes. Now the other wheel that I have, and I've watched everything about all the spinning wheels that you've done before, and I had to rewatch everything again because all of a sudden it clicked for me. I think it's a Canadian production wheel.
Yes, 100%. That is a Canadian production wheel.
I had to replace the leather bearings on the front and back. The front one, the wood actually cracked off, so I've had to... My mom sacrificed one of her belts for me. So thanks, Mom.
First of all, it's beautiful. Canadian production wheels are interesting because there were different makers at that time and then different time periods, and depending on who you're looking at, you're going to see different features. The giveaway is the tilt function, the mother of all, rather than having the screw that slides it back and forth on like an actual like assembly that moves. Go back to the hole. Give me a second, I'll show you what I have a theory about what happened there. I'll go grab it and show you. I haven't actually showed this on my channel yet, so this would be like a special reveal because I think you've got something cool there. I'll be right back.
Unfortunately, at exactly this moment, my entire computer recording software completely freaked out, and I guess it wanted to leave you all in suspense of what Evie was going to show me. I did my best to edit down our conversation to the bits that were relevant and hopefully interesting to you. What you won't see is that Evie and I talked for almost an hour. And I think my computer just had enough of trying to record that conversation. But if you want to know more and if you want to learn more about spinning wheels, I can highly recommend Evie's channel, which is Jillian Eve. I'll of course link it everywhere so you can access it. She's also doing Vlogmas. The only reason I got my wheel to work is because of her videos, and as a little bit of a sneak preview because I'm pretty sure she's going to make some content about this in the future if you want to subscribe to her and follow her. The holes on my Canadian production wheel, she suspects, are to do with retrofitting an electric spinning mechanism on there, which she has one herself and has like archival information about it. It's so cool. Again, 100% recommend following her and seeing maybe she'll show that at some point in the future. My computer just really enjoys ending everything on a cliffhanger, I guess. Anyway, and her videos are the reason in the first place that I realized that I had a Canadian production wheel. It was a little bit of a comedy routine for me to get the dry band working because this is my first time doing a dry band, and you can see it tested my patience at times, but I was able to follow her tutorial and I got a beautifully working dry band. My wheel has a tilt tension mechanism. On Evie's video on her Canadian production wheel, she mentions a book that you can get from a Ravelry group that talks about the individual family makers that created these wheels, which I think is fantastic and absolutely fascinating to be able to trace it down to that much specificity. And my particular wheel's tilt tension mechanism was patented by the family Vicina. That mechanism was patented in 1880, and I think the family stopped producing wheels around the 19 teens-ish time frame, but CPWs generally stopped being in production in the 1930s. So my wheel is sometime after 1880 and sometime before 1930s / probably 19 teens. Somewhere in that time frame. So definitely an antique wheel, most likely, is what I have, which I think is so cool. Like I mentioned in the call, I had a little bit of time to fiddle around with the wheel before I spoke with Evie, and I managed to get it to a working point because I realized that the leather bearings on my flyer had to be, well, I guess it's not my flyers, on the maidens of the mother of all, that had to be replaced. I had some leather shoelaces that I was able to use for the back bearing, but the front one, I had a piece of wood that cracked off and it just was pretty unstable. And again, thank you so much to my mom for sacrificing one of her leather belts, and I was able to kind of get it to a point where my flyer wouldn't fall off when I was spinning, which sometimes that was happening, which is a little frustrating, but we got it working. And I'm so excited because that means that now that I have a working spinning wheel, I can start spinning. I have some pre-prepared roving that I got from another place. It's very similar to the rolags that I was making, or at least it feels a bit similar. So I was hoping to get a bit of a feel for the CPW, and again for spinning. It's been 8 or 9 months since I spun anything last. So before I touched the rolags that I made last time, I decided to practice a little bit on this other roving and get to know the wheel a little bit better before I touch my precious own fleece that I was processing. So after spinning up some of this sample roving that I had, I decided to ply it up just to see what it might look like coming off of this wheel, just to see if my spinning was too loose or too tight. I think it's a bit tight, but overall I was happy with how it looked and I was too excited. So that same evening I grabbed one of the rolags I had recently made and I decided to start spinning my actual fleece into yarn. This is such an exciting moment for me. I'm sitting here spinning and I'm just realizing that I am spinning this S twist and I meant to spin it Z twist because I faintly remember that traditionally, at least in Europe, wool was spun Z twist and applied S. But I'm just now realizing as I'm looking at the wheel that I am not doing Z twist, I'm doing S twist. And I don't know if I've been doing that since the beginning or if somehow I changed it like part way through. Oh, oh well. I guess I'll just keep on spinning and we'll see when we take this yarn off a bobbin if I accidentally changed partway through. I don't even know what I would do. Is it possible to do that? I feel like as a beginner, a lot of things are possible that as someone with experience, they would be like, what, why, how did you manage that? Yeah, I guess we'll see in a bit if I manage to do that. Oh boy. I hope not. I don't even know what I would do with it if I did, like I said. Oh gosh. Anyway. So I checked the yarn as it was coming off of the bobbin, and nope, I had spun this entire thing in S-twist. I 100% thought I was doing Z-twist, or at least that's what I wanted to do, but I guess, nope, I did S. Oh well, that's fine. We're definitely not at the best consistency, and I think I'm going to center pole ball ply this, but I am not even close to being done with getting through all of the yarn yet. I just wanted to make sure I didn't overfill my bobbin, so that's why I wound this off, and I'm going to apply this a little bit later. It's hard to explain how wonderful it feels to have made this ball so far. Sorry, I'm actually getting emotional. I'm just so happy that we've gotten this far. It's really moving for me personally. Okay, I can't break down yet. I have to get the rest of the rolags. I mean, I don't have to, but I would like to. It's just gorgeous outside. So I think I'm actually going to move my spinning wheel outside and do some spinning out there. After spending the rest of the afternoon spinning, I ended up with these 2 balls of yarn, and it is so exciting to look at them. I also took out my scale just to see how much yarn I ended up getting, because I know that we had just around 100 grams of rolags that I created, and it turns out that I had 113 grams of yarn created from that. I think I had 113 on the scale at one point with the rolags, but it was harder to weigh. Then it was time to ply them up. They didn't weigh exactly the same, and I wasn't sure about my consistency, so rather than plying them together, I just did a center pole ball ply for both of them individually, and that's how I then ended up with my yarn. And now today I have my wonderful 3 little skeins of yarn. I cannot believe I made this. I ended up having 3 rather than 2 because when I was plying the wool back on itself, I did again a center pole ball ply. The resulting yarn ended up being quite big for the bobbin, like it just didn't hold as tightly on the bobbin, and so I went as long as I could, but there were some points where it just wasn't taking up onto the bobbin anymore, so I had to split off a little bit of the ends up with those balls, and then I created this little mini skein of wool, which is really fun. I did soak these in water and thwack them a little bit to set the twist, but I do think it's inconsistent. It's slightly boucle, very textured. So I'm gonna have a think a little bit about exactly what I'm going to make with this. Yep. Oh, hi. We're joining again today. Do you want to help talk about a really exciting part of the project? No, she does not. Been a while, and I got some comments about it actually asking me if I ever hand knit anymore, and I do, but I have to go a little bit slower than I did in the past because I do have some repetitive use injuries now in my hands and my wrists and my forearms. I knit as fast as I could without hopefully re-irritating those injuries. It's another reason why I love my knitting machine so much, is because they allow me to rest my hands so that I can hand knit on the things that I really want to hand knit, because I'm a little bit more limited right now in what I can and can't hand knit. But today is the day where I am so excited. I have been back and forth on what to make with this yarn. The first thing that I decided to do was try to understand how much I have. I do have a yarn counter. Again, I don't have access to it right now. So my best bet was to approximate how thick the yarn was and how much my yarn weighed, and try to find similar like thickness or wraps per inch yarns online and see how much yardage that would turn out to. And my best guess is that I had around 300 yards, probably a little under 300 yards. And that helped me narrow down exactly what kinds of patterns I could make. The other thing that I wanted to test is, what did my yarn look like knit up? Because I knew that there were inconsistencies. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's beautiful. I think textured yarn is great. But I did want to see what it looked like knit up as a swatch, to see if I should kind of stick with patterns that allow the texture of the yarn to shine, or if I should go for like a cable or some sort of lace pattern. And after seeing the swatch, I decided actually I really like the natural texture of this first spin, and I kind of want that to be the thing that shines in this piece. And so I am going to just find a pattern that is mostly stockinette so that I can kind of admire my own homespun yarn, I guess, or like the texture and inconsistencies of it, and actually have that be the feature of that piece. And what was really interesting to me was finding a project that I could use up every last bit of yarn that I had without being worried that it would run out. So like if I just did a rectangular scarf, right, then I would just knit until the yarn is done, basically. And that would be really nice because I would use up most of it. I don't wear a ton of scarves, I wear more shawls. So I was looking at a few shawl patterns that were kind of like within the weight and yardage range, and also advertise themselves as like knit for however big you want to make your piece. And I was heavily considering making them when I realized I started having a conversation again with my friend who also processes her own fleece and does spinning and owns goats and all of that. We were talking about the rest of this fleece and how I should go forward in processing it, when I realized that I have I only worked through and made 1/3 of my entire fleece into yarn. And what is actually a better candidate to make a shawl or a scarf of some kind is the rest of this fleece, because then I'd have twice as much yarn as I have now. So rather than around 300 yards, I'd have 600, which could make a more substantial shawl, which I would prefer personally. And I think it'd be really cool if I made some sort of matching set with this fleece. So like a shawl and mittens, or like a shawl and a hat. The thing is, with mittens, I lose them. I am the worst. I don't know what it is, but sometimes I have to take them off in order to use my phone or in order to do something with Nutella. And then I put them in my pockets, and then by the time I get home, they're not in my pockets anymore. With a hat, that just stays on my head. My hats I don't lose, my mittens and gloves I lose. So I really didn't want to make something that I am afraid of losing, which means that a hat is the perfect category of thing to make so that I can make a matching set, hopefully with the rest of my fleece at some point in the future, of a hat and a shawl / scarf, maybe even woven. We'll have to see. Some people also asked if I was going to dye the yarn, and I like that idea. I think I might do that for the scarf. I might make some contrast stripes with some natural dyes, but for my hat, I love the natural cream color. I think it's beautiful, and I was shocked at the beauty of that color that I got from really, really dirty, I have to say it was quite a dirty fleece. So I just kind of wanted that to shine, that we were able to get from where that fleece started to that beautiful cream color. There was quite a few hat patterns that I was debating between, but what really drew me as a pattern pattern was the Oslo hat from Petite Knits because it has basically 3 layers of knits around your ears. And I've said it, I think, a few times in the past, but anytime I'm out in the winter, my ears are the coldest thing, my ears and my forehead. So if I have 3 layers of knits around my forehead and my ears, I think that'll make me really, really comfy. And I also think that just like generally the shape of this hat looks beautiful. It allows a lot of the texture to shine in the stockinette pattern. I have my fingers and toes crossed that I have enough yarn for it. I guess I can do some modifications in the length if I need to. Like the flap, I think as written is like 3 inches wide. I don't know that it needs to be fully 3 inches. Let us hope I have enough yarn. I am a little worried, but I'm hopeful. So we'll see. Okay, let's get to knitting. I was a little worried that the hat was going to be too big, but I actually think, I'm like very carefully trying it on, I think it's going to be just the right size. I have this much yarn left of this first ball, which is the bigger ball, and I'm at just under 5 inches. So if I fold it over the crown now, it'd be like 2.5 inches, just under. I do think that I want to get to 6 inches before I do the fold over, but I do feel better going a little shorter on the brim and being a little bit more conservative on the yarn usage. I still don't know if it's going to be enough. I'll try and we'll see. So it's beautiful evening light. I'm going to keep on knitting. I'm very thankful for some pictures that people have posted about how they did the fold over brim and everything and what the instructions really mean, because the pattern's not bad. I just didn't fully get it until I saw the pictures of other people doing it. I've gotten to about 5.5 inches. This is how much yarn I have left of this first ball. I was gonna try to make it to 6 inches, but I'm starting to get a little nervous that I'm gonna have enough, because after I do the brim, I have to knit for 6 more inches and then I have to decrease. And if I could not even get to 6 inches with this, I think this is gonna be cutting it so close. Okay. So the next bit, so this is as far as I've knit so far, I'm going to actually knit the next row and the cast on edge together so that we get that fold over brim action. So let's see how that goes. I have knit the whole fold and I love how it looks. So in the end, it's actually going to be sitting like this, kind of folded up, and I'm going to be knitting the hat coming out this way. So first, so that we don't see the wrong bit, we knit a little bit more here and then we're going to turn it around. I'm sorry I haven't been updating as much as I probably should. I've just been knitting in some like odd times that I've had throughout the day. I have knit the hat. This is the double wide brim. I'm up to the decreases and I have this much yarn left. I feel like it looks like more than it is, because I'm working from the inside to the out on this, but cross your fingers for me that it'll be enough. I guess I can always rip back and take out, because I think it is like the hat is meant to be a little oversized. And if I rip out some of the rows before the decreases, then I can have it fit tighter, but I can do a little fit check. I think the blocking will help with the brim as well, because it doesn't really want to fold over nicely. But here's the hat. Oh yeah, it's definitely like, and now I'm doing the decreases, but we're already kind of past the own crown of my head. So it's definitely gonna be on the longer side for hats, but I like it so far. So let me do the decreases, and please cross your fingers for me that this is going to be, well, I guess I still have a tiny bit left on my smallest skein, but I'm hoping that maybe I can get away with just this one, because I'd like to save the small skein as like my first real usable wool that I ever spun. So let's do the decreases now and hope it's good enough. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe I have gone from fleece to something wearable. I learned how to process a fleece, how to wash it, how to pick it, how to comb it, how to spin it. Well, I guess not comb, card it, how to spin it. And I finally knit up this wonderful hat. I have about this much left of the last ball of yarn I used on the entirety of that little mini skein that I made. But not to worry, I still have 2/3 of the fleece left over that I would like to process. And I think it might be a great candidate to weave myself a matching scarf for this hat. And for that, I will use up the rest of this one. So this will definitely get used. I am so glad I just jumped in, I dived in, and I did it, because while there's definitely some imperfections, I think it is absolutely beautiful. It's warm, it's comfortable, I love it. I'm not gonna stop wearing it this winter. As you can tell, it's the perfect weather to wear it. I am so pleased with how the hat turned out, and I have only processed 1/3 of the fleece, which means I have 2/3 remaining, and that is why I wanted to put this together as inspiration for myself and a reminder for myself before I touch the rest of it into what I'm going to make. I made the hat because I wanted to make a matching set. So my goal is to make a matching shawl to go with my hat, but I also want to dye it with some natural dye in a few different hues, but all from the same dye source. So that's what's going to be coming up really soon. Is I'm going to tackle the rest of the fleece, dye it, prep it. I've got some new tools that I'm building to do that, and I am going to do some spinning and weaving. I've been practicing a lot of spinning too, so I'm hoping I can spin a little bit more consistently for the rest of this fleece and to make my shawl. Like I always say, I know we're all really busy, so it means a lot to me that you decide to spend a little bit of time with me and crafting with me. It's really fun for me to share everything that I've been working on. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you again really soon. Let's work on the rest of the fleece. Bye.